Hey guys, kinggath here, and in this guide we're going to go over the Sim Settlements 2 HUD elements that are available to you inside of your settlements if you have the mod HUD framework installed, which is highly recommended. Now, as always, at the start of these guides, I'm going to preface with two things. One is that this information is available on our wiki if you prefer to read it at wiki.simsettlements2.com. And the second is if I discuss a gameplay element that you don't like, you can most likely change or disable it entirely in our settings. Our holotape and MCM menu have a plethora of options to customize the way Sim Settlements 2 plays. The SS2 HUD is primarily made up of three elements: the status meters, which are on the lower left-hand side of the screen, the resource panel on the upper right side of the screen, and the info box, which will pop up occasionally depending on circumstances, and that will be off to the left of your cursor. Now, all of these are designed to show up primarily in workshop mode, so if you don't see them currently, it might be because you're not in workshop mode or because you don't have HUD framework installed. That is a requirement to get those elements. Even though they are provided by SS2, HUD framework is required and it will be detected by SS2 in order to display them. So the resource panel, if you are looking for information about what the icons represent and the various views of it, because some of you may be seeing a different layout than what I have, you'll want to check out the virtual resources guide, which will have a lot more information on that. But at a high level, basically the resource panel is showing you how many supplies your settlers have in storage that you, the player, don't have access to. These are used explicitly for SS2 mechanics that have costs involved. So we'll stick to that for now. There's a little bit more I will show you later in this guide. So let's start out by focusing heavily on the status meters. So on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see at the top there that we have a little picture of the waving Vault Boy matching the people icon at the top of the vanilla HUD. And then you have the same 8 there. So at the top of the HUD we have 8, and in our HUD we have 8. But where we have a different number is after the slash, and that's showing you the max settlers you should currently expect in the settlement. And that number by default is going to be the base game value for the max settlers you could get, which is based on your charisma plus 10. So if you have a charisma of 4 like I do, you should see a 14 there. Now there are a few things that can change that max number. One is if you're using a city plan, instead it will show you the max number that city plan was designed to support at its current level. If you have a communications building class built, that will change to the number of beds that are in that settlement, as that changes the recruitment rules. And so anything that changes the recruitment rules can change that number there after the population. You may also have additional elements to the right of that, and those are related to city plans, and we'll talk about that in a guide related to city plans specifically. All right, next let's go down to the meters. First we have food, then water, then defense and power, and those all mirror the base game in their icons, but notice that they don't necessarily match the status. So in general, in the base game of Fallout 4, what we try to do is make it so that all the numbers at the top are in green instead of red, but that's not necessarily enough once you have SS2 installed. For example, you can see in my game, the base HUD shows that food is fine, and in SS2 it is not fine. What's interesting here is that in this case, I don't even have enough food for all of the people. So generally, even in the base game HUD, it shouldn't be showing up as green. That may be some sort of bug in the base game. But as you get deeper into SS2, the needs of your settlers will exceed the base game rules. And so you should follow the SS2 meters to determine if you've maxed out your values for that settlement rather than the base game HUD. So ignore those numbers at the top. Just because they're green does not mean that your settlers are happy and that they're going to be able to upgrade their plots. And instead, you should focus on filling up those meters. After the 4 base game resources, we have the 4 SS2 specific, which are cleanliness, homes, jobs, and leisure. We also sometimes refer to leisure as hobbies, or you can think of them as recreational plot assignments. And lastly, we've got the happiness meter. Now, 2 of these meters you may not have on your screen yet, and that is because they unlock as you get access to the corresponding mechanics. For example, the cleanliness rating doesn't show up until you can do something about it, and that happens when you get access to the sanitation class. And recreation or leisure won't show up until you have access to recreation plots. Now, the general idea behind the status meters is to give you something to focus on. So if you're not sure what you should be building, you can't go wrong with trying to get some of those meters to be filled by building the corresponding resource. Now, there are a couple of them that are somewhat optional. So first up, cleanliness. If you are playing with the disease system turned off, Or if you've gone all in and researched all of the disease vaccines, you can actually ignore cleanliness in your settlements, because cleanliness has to do with the chance of disease outbreaks. So obviously without diseases, there's no need to worry about that anymore. Next is jobs. Technically, you don't have to have a job for any of your settlers if you don't want to. That is not tied to happiness in any way, but without a job, they're actually not providing any benefit to your settlement. So they're not generating any virtual resources, they're not providing any food, etc. So most of you will want to have a job for each of your people. Now, obviously, there's an exception in the new mechanics for those of you playing outposts and soldiers, as some people without a job would make great warriors so that they're ready to go when you need people to go out in the field and attack with you. But that will be covered in more depth when we get to the soldier mechanic guides. Then lastly is recreation. This is completely optional. Recreation is a third assignment type that was added in SS2. So in the base game, you can assign a bed and a job. In SS2, you can also assign their after work activity. And this is completely optional, and in our mechanics it's designed to be rather expensive so that it's a luxury, something you'd worry about in the mid to late game as opposed to the early game. So it's okay if you only have a couple of people with their leisure assignments early on. Perhaps you just want to build some extra plots to bump up happiness. That's fine. And then as you have excess resources, start to build more of those. So you don't actually have to fill that one. If your focus is just on getting your happiness up, which will help your population grow and ensure that your production is maxed out, you'll want to focus on food, water, defense, and homes, with the rest of them being optional. Power is generally required to cause your plots to upgrade, so that's where that's needed, but there can be reasons to not upgrade. Maybe you want to keep the overall costs of your settlement low, so maybe you don't want to upgrade right away, and then not powering them can be an easy way to control that. So status meters are kind of pointing you in the right direction. All right, the next part of the SS2 HUD is the info box. And for most newcomers, it feels a little bit fiddly because it's not clear how it's working. So I want to walk you guys through how it actually functions. So the info box is our ability to show extra information to you. Whenever you activate an ASAM sensor, a workshop object, or a settler, you will get a little extra information on the HUD on the left-hand side. Now, what generally happens is it quickly disappears. So if you are activating a plot, you're looking to get this plot options menu, and the HUD can only show one element at a time, so it's showing the message box. But after you are finished in this message box and you close it out, you will see our info box will show up there, and it shows the name of the thing you activated, or in the case of an ASAM sensor, it shows you the plot that it's associated with. Then it will show you any requirements. So generally that's going to be that a settler needs to be assigned. It will show you what it provides. So for plots, this generally will first show the building class icon. So whatever you have assigned there, it will show its class, and then any numeric benefits. So that could be things like food production, or in this case, it's showing us that it's giving us 600 max scrap storage. And then on some classes, you'll see a daily section, and that will show you the costs and daily production. Generally, this has to do with virtual resources. So provides are flat benefits like food and water, whereas daily will be little changes in the virtual resources. In fact, I can show you one on this bar over here. So if we activate this ASAM sensor, we get the little system to pop up, and then we close out of here. So you can see that it requires a settler assigned. It has an additional requirement of 2 defense. So basically it's saying that by having this bar, your settlement needs 2 defense more than it normally would. It's providing a happiness boost, and it's providing the bar class. And then daily, it's producing 47 caps for your virtual resources. So this is just a quick way to kind of see what's going on. You can also get a lot of this information from the view details when you're talking about plots. So if we go to view details here, you'll see that we have a lot of this information here. So we can see that it's providing 30 happiness. It's requiring an additional 2 defense and 2 power. I can show you the level. A lot of information here, but not everything is displayed here. And that is where a lot of times these icons on the HUD can be useful, especially for production. When you get into things like building materials class, you'll see quite a lot of icons on there, so you can see things. If you're using the operating cost systems or the maintenance cost systems, those can also show up there to show you various costs at a glance when you're walking up to a plot. The other place the info box shows up is when you activate an NPC. So if we activate this settler here, now occasionally it will bring you into the dialogue screen. So it might bring you into a trade screen or something like that. And then of course, just like the ASAM sensor menu, this will be hidden until you get out of that. But here we have the status, and that's going to show you whether or not they're sick. So before you get access to the Vitaminatic tools, which come pretty late in the quest line where you can see their actual diseases, this status symbol will show you either that they are fine, happy, they're not diseased currently. And then depending on the severity of the disease, so if they just have like a very minor disease, you might see a thermometer in their mouth, whereas if they've got several diseases or a particularly nasty disease, you might see X's in the eyes, which indicate that the settler is incapacitated. And a lot of those icons will show up even if you've got some of the penalties disabled. So perhaps you have incapacitation disabled. You still might see that icon just showing you that the settler is especially sick. Then under assigned, you can see their job, their home, and their recreation assignment. And so those are going to show the class for the job and for recreation. And the home will either be dulled out if they don't have one. In this case, the settler is lacking one, or it will be bright if they have one. So you can quickly see what they're assigned to. So some of you may also be familiar with occasionally the talk button gets replaced with the name of a job title, and that is refreshed every time you come back to a settlement. So if you find that occasionally it's talk, sometimes it has their job title. When you exit a settlement and re-enter it, or the first time you enter a settlement, it will go through and calculate what their titles should be. So that's why you'll find that occasionally it's just showing talk. Like for example, after a loaded new save, which is the case with this, it might not show it for all those settlers, but then when you return to it, it will have that information there. But again, you can see it on the info box as well. Now, for those of you on a decent PC who don't have a lot of script problems, if you're able to run a fairly full load order without many issues, you might want to try this option. So I'm going to show you an MCM, assuming you're on PC, you probably have access to this. This is available in the holotape as well. But if we go under mod config here, go down to Sim Settlements 2, and we go to our HUD, you'll see that there's a hover display option. And if we turn this on, rather than having to activate things, we can simply get near them and have them hovered over our cursor for the info box to display. Now, one of the reasons this is not enabled by default is it's very script intensive, and for something like Xbox, it just would make the system unusable. It would require so many resources to do. So try it out on your system, see if it works well for you. It does make the mod much more user-friendly from the info box settings perspective, but it can be a little bit intense. So while we're in the menu here, turning off this setting, I want to show you guys a series of hotkeys you can set up that will let you change the way the resource panel works, which is one of the more valuable settings in here. So if we go down to the cycle resource panel report level and toggle resource panel report view, these are two very, very useful hotkeys that you can set. I can show you another way to do it if you don't have MCM. I will show you that shortly. So I've set this to K and L respectively. So we can go ahead and show you these. So we're going to go into workshop mode so that we can get access to the resource panel HUD. And I'm going to go ahead and push K. And the first thing that happens when you cycle through is it will show you the split between your current settlement and the caravan network. So it can often be interesting or useful to know how much the local settlement has versus how much is on the caravan network. Because once you're connected to caravan services, your settlement is going to show by default on the resource panel your entire network, not just the current settlement. So if you want to see just that local settlement, you can cycle temporarily to this view. The next view, if we go to it, will show you, in addition, the daily changes. So this is how much is being produced or consumed at your settlement and on the network each day. So this can be a good way to see an overview of what's going on at your settlement and the network and see if you need to change anything. Now, because this information is so useful, we actually have a hotkey to go directly to it. But before we get to that, let's go one more time through this, and then that is going to be the days remaining view. So this is effectively showing you the same kind of information as the previous one with an additional tab showing you how long until you run out of that thing. So this can be super useful, especially if you're playing in component complexity, if you want to figure out how long you have left before you have to deal with a problem. So if you want to kind of kick the can down the road, this can be a quick way to tell you if you're in dire straits or not. All right, so let's go back to the base view. So from here, if we hit our other hotkey, which is report view, this will expand the HUD and immediately jump to the report that people find the most value from, and that is showing you your daily changes. So you can quickly see, is there something that I'm going to run out of if I don't change things? So this is kind of a way to see, is your settlement or is your settlement network balanced in a way that it can provide for itself? So you can see whether or not you have enough resources coming in. This is especially valuable for people who are playing with operating costs or maintenance costs, because those incur daily resource charges. Whereas most of you, by default, you're not going to have those systems enabled, and so you're going to find that the daily change is always going to be positive because there wouldn't be any guaranteed daily expenditures. So this is going to be super useful for those of you playing with all of the systems on. So if you played in hardcore, you will find that your daily change values are kind of be all over the place, and it might be very useful for you to jump in and check this out. All right, so for MCM, you can use hotkeys to get access to that. But if you're not using MCM, say you're using Xbox or you're on PC and don't have F4SE and don't want to use MCM, you can actually craft this City Manager Tools item from a City Planner's desk. And this is something that you can favorite and activate to bring up a menu. And from here, you'll have the Resource Panel Report View toggle. So if you want to be able to quickly jump into that report view and get access to it, that is a way you can do it. So you don't have access to the full suite of tools because it would get really annoying to cycle through using this particular thing, but you do have the ability to at least quickly get to the report view, which we've found most people use most frequently out of all of the different resource panel views. So that's an option for those of you who on Xbox who are looking for a quick way to get access to additional information. All right, the last thing we'll cover for this video are some of the options you have related to the HUD. So I'm going to show you inside the holotape, but you can also access these settings in MCM if you're using it. So if we go into the City Manager 2078 holotape, go to Options, and then HUD, you'll see that we have a variety of things here. So first up, we have Augmented Reality. That is where you control those plot icons, which we covered in another guide related to plot upgrades. You've got Info Box, which we talked about, which is that thing that pops up when you activate settlers or workshop objects. Resources Panel, which is the thing on the right. Status Meters is the thing on the left. And then Settlement Info is actually part of the status meters. On a technical level, it's actually a separate little element, but most people assume it's part of status meters since it's right above it. And that incorporates the population numbers. And if you're using a city plan, it shows you the percent and progress of the city plan. Then we've got Disable HUD. For that, if you don't want to use the SS2 HUD, but you do have HUD Framework installed, you can disable it from there. And then here, this is an extra little tool if you are having trouble with your position settings. So we do have the ability for you to customize the position, which I can show you that shortly. If you are having trouble on a specific screen resolution where the HUD elements are not lining up well, you can change those. And then this option is a way for you to reload them if it seems to be ignoring your previous set settings. So let's quickly go into some of these. So Info Box, this is where you can find that hover display I showed you before, but you also have the ability to turn off for it to automatically display when you activate. So you could say, for example, turn on hover display and turn off activation display if you like. Or if you find that the Info Box is not very useful to you, you could turn off both. Then we've got Resource Panel, and the Resource Panel, Settlement Info, and Status Meters all have this same thing I'm going to show you. So I'm just going to show it to you once, and that is the auto hide settings. And basically this determines when that HUD element should hide itself. So always hidden basically means you don't want to use it. We've got outside workshop mode, which means when you exit workshop mode, that element should hide itself. And never auto hide means you just always want it on. So if you like it, even when you're outside of workshop mode, it will remain displaying. Only when you're inside of settlements, so after you exit your settlements, the meters and resource panel, all these panels will hide themselves. But if you want it to be always on while you're in a settlement, you're going to want to turn on this never auto hide option. So those are your options. Those are available for, again, resource panel, settlement info, and status meters. All right, now let's go in and show you guys how you can adjust the HUD. So if you find that the HUD is not working out for your particular monitor resolution or television resolution, you have a couple of options. So in MCM, there are a series of hotkey settings you can set for temporarily setting hotkeys for the sake of modifying the HUD. So if we go under SS2, under hotkeys, and we go way down here, you can see that there's these position hotkeys. So basically with Cycle Active HUD Panel, it lets you activate one of the particular elements. So if I push G here, if I can get my mouse centered in, if we push G, it will highlight one of them. So there it's highlighting the info box. And then I can set the other hotkeys to kind of nudge it around my screen, scale it up and down, and then hit G again, cycle to the next element, and it'll highlight whatever one I'm working on. If it doesn't come up with one, this is a common problem with HUD framework related things, is that there can be a delay where it doesn't respond to your key presses, so you may have to push it several times. But whatever element is highlighted, those position and scale keys will apply to that, and it will save those settings, so between sessions it will remember what you did last time. And that is where that reset positions and scale option that was in the holotape, that's where that would come into play. If in a previous session you had set up all these settings and they didn't load for some reason, you can do it through there. Now if you're on Xbox where you don't have access to the MCM hotkeys, you can go back to the City Manager Tools and go to the HUD position controls. And from this, you select the panel. So let's say we want to do our resource panel here, and we activate it. And then we go back, and then you can see that it highlighted, and then it brings up this modifying panel, and now we can adjust its positioning or scale it up and down. And then we can also do a show HUD for several seconds. So if we go nudge up again, you can see that it's slowly moving up. If we want to do show HUD for 5 seconds, it's just going to hide that menu for 5 seconds and let us see. So if the quick flashes when we're hitting nudge before it comes up is not enough for you to get your bearings, you can click this to give yourself a reprieve and be able to see like, okay, I'm happy with that particular setting. And so this is just a little bit slower method than the hotkeys, but it's an option that's available for those of you on Xbox or who aren't using MCM. And again, after you're done, finish this, and it should hide the HUD once again, and it will record those settings. All right, guys, hopefully this guide will help you out with some of the SS2 HUD elements. If you are here looking for HUD information for HQ, that will be done in a separate guide. All right, guys, take care and enjoy the mods.